Chapter 16, the causes of illness. Are they edible? Are they like chickens and cows and fruits?
None of the animals are used for food. Some of the plants are edible. All the prototype plants used for food are called the trees of life. They are used by the leaders to prolong their lives beyond the normal 7,000-year lifespan. The elders live for over 700,000 years using the trees of life as nourishment.
Can anyone really live that long?
Believe it, you'll soon witness it.
What causes sickness? Are there separate causes for every illness? Or is there one genetic reason why people become ill?
This may sound strange to most people, but among the people of the Black nation in their natural environment, there is no sickness. Sickness did not exist before 6,000 years ago and will cease to exist after the end of this cycle. All sickness is caused by neglecting some aspect of your character. That will sound even stranger to all modern people who have been raised and educated to believe in the physical causes of illness alone. Every illness is related to some aspect of your character. The body is the unity of all aspects of character, and neglecting one or more of them results in illness in the corresponding part of the body. Among our people in our natural environment, there is no neglecting of any part of our character. We also know the proper foods to eat and the right time to eat them, so sickness does not have the slightest chance to exist.
Even the common cold?
Even the common cold. Isn't it obvious that the common cold is caused by stress? When the weather changes, especially from one season to the next, it exerts an external stress on the body. If the body is already under the internal stress of modern life, then you easily become prey to viruses. If you could remove all internal stress, thereby restoring that aspect of your character, external stresses would have no effect on you.
It's almost impossible to remove internal stress. There's so much pressure in everyday modern life.
Yes, this is the time for such things. It wasn't always this way, nor will it remain like this for much longer.
I know you said to keep the questions to the present subject, but you've mentioned the cycles before. Can I ask you more about that?
We'll have enough time to discuss all the details concerning cycles, but first things first.
So, all the people were taught about the aspects of character and how to stay healthy.
Yes, there are 10 festivals that we call life rituals. During each one, the people are taught about the aspects. The character of every individual develops in a timely manner starting from childhood. The first 7,000 aspects of character are taught to children from the age of 7 until they are 14 years old. The school system is set up such that they attend the rituals 3 or 4 times a week for about 7 months of every year. The attendance is not continuous, naturally. They break during the planting and harvesting seasons and at other times. As I already mentioned, the ancient calendar division had a week of 10 days, making 3 weeks to every month. The 12 months have 30 days each, with 5 or 6 days added at the end of the year, depending on whether it's a regular or leap year. This calendar is exactly as our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, recorded it in their writings. They kept that system well until about 2,000 years ago.
I heard Dr. Jewel Pookrum reveal in one of her lectures similar ideas about the real nature of illness, the body, and the spirit. For example, she shared that often women who are knock kneed have suffered some sort of sexual abuse. As a result, and a protective mechanism, the knees instinctively turned in to prevent further violation. Can you elaborate by sharing some specific illnesses and the character flaws or deficiencies to which they relate? I think sharing that information will help us who've been disconnected from the ritual process. Thanks.
Diseases fall under two classes of causes: those caused by a deficiency in the individual's own character, and those imposed on them due to a deficiency in someone else's character. The example you gave falls under the second class, where the deformity is not the result of a particular deficiency in that individual, but a character flaw in another person, who then imposes it on her by committing a crime against her. There are many examples of this type of imposition, some due to neglect, some unintended, resulting in deformities, traumas, addictions, and diseases. One common example is improper or inadequate breastfeeding. A lot of mothers in modern society breastfeed their children very inadequately, if at all. Once a child has had mother's milk directly from her breast, there is no substitute that can take its place, but many women are advised to feed artificial formulas to their children. The most common damage that results from this comes in adulthood in the form of cigarette addiction. Unbelievable as it may sound, a large percentage of addiction to cigarettes is the result of insufficient time spent at the mother's breast. Cigarette companies know this and design cigarette butts the same color as a white woman's nipple and make the rest of it white like milk to evoke these childhood memories, not to mention the chemicals they add to make sure people stay addicted. Other drug addictions are caused by insufficient love given to infants who need it the most. Later in adulthood, after experiencing the high of drugs, it reminds them of the parental love that they experienced but a few times and have been yearning for ever since. After the first high, they seek in vain to recapture that feeling and thus become addicted. All such ignorant impositions can be removed easily by training all people from childhood to develop their character properly. Such training would result in proper ways of raising children. At present, this ignorance is passed from generation to generation. Adding to that are the diseases that come from the person's own character deficiencies. These are caused mostly by lack of character development or improper development as a child. The biggest of these is the non-development of the natural courage in children. So many children are raised in conditions of fear. They are taught to fear strangers, to fear their own parents, to fear the dark, and even their own fantasies that come from their imaginations. This instilling of fear destroys the natural fearlessness and courage that all children are born with. The fear then later on causes many diseases such as asthma and allergies. Neglecting to develop self-love in children warps their character the most and results in a myriad of diseases such as diabetes, obesity, and so on. As we continue with biology and genetics, I'll give more examples of other diseases and the character flaws that cause them.
Can you provide more information about the science of food energy? Do foods have feminine and masculine energies? If so, how does this impact our individual health? And how can you tell what energy exists around specific food?
Rather than female and male, food energies would more appropriately be called positive, negative, and neutral. Even these words give a false meaning. More accurate words would be energizing, harmonizing, and neutral, or stabilizing. There are foods to be eaten when people are low in energy, and their opposite to be eaten when they're hyperactive. These harmonize the energy back into balance. In addition, there's a third type of food in the middle, so to speak. They're called staple foods, such as grains, and keep the energy more or less steady. Human beings are vegetarians under natural circumstances. At present, our bodies are in a less than natural state, so the eating of foods like cow milk is necessary, as well as a little meat, but much less than people usually consume. There are enough proteins in plant foods to nourish even the most active people, so it's possible to live completely without meat, as long as one takes a little milk. Plant foods can thus be divided into these three classes. They correspond to the three divisions of the human body: the head area, the chest area, and the intestinal area and lower body. The plant has a correspondence to these three parts in an exactly upside down way. In other words, the roots of plants correspond to the head area. Foods like carrots and other edible roots nourish the brain and the head area. Not potatoes, though, which are not roots, but stems. Their roots are little hairs coming out of the tuber, so tubers are not root foods. Edible roots are thus positive or energizing foods. The stems of plants, which include grains like wheat and beans, are chest foods and nourish the middle part of the body. These are neutral or staple foods. The third group are those that grow at the highest parts of the plant, meaning the leaves and fruits. They harmonize the body's energy level. Although both men and women need all three kinds of food, women need the higher parts more, corresponding to the lower and middle body, and men need the lower part of the plant more, corresponding to the upper chest and head area. As far as specific foods to eat and how often to eat them, it would take too long to list. Besides, an accurate book has already been written on nutrition. It's a little book you can read in a day or two and has no equal as far as the teachings on nutrition and proper eating habits. It's called How to Eat to Live, Part 1 and 2 by Elijah Muhammad.
What's your take on the tidal waves that have recently hit the area around Southern Asia, areas filled with Black people? I remember hearing a tape by Dr. Delbert Blair where he alluded to such quote unquote weather occurrences as being man made, specifically created to assist in wiping out Black people. What say you? My thought exactly. After reading about the incident, I thought the same thing. I believe that Whitey possesses the power, with the help of technology, that is, to manipulate the weather and cause the earth to tremble. I knew this ever since I was a child. I remember that every time they tried to go up in space, there was a tremendous change in the weather. It would rain for days, and I would think to myself that they were interfering with Mother Nature. I do believe that this was man made to help wipe out the Black race. I am not an expert on this matter, but I do believe in my heart that they do have a hand in any and everything that is the opposite of life and anything that is good. This is just my opinion. Peace.
Sisters, man made disasters are nothing compared to this. This was definitely a natural disaster. The earthquake bodily moved an entire island in a few dozen feet and had the power of over 2,000 nuclear bombs. It made a crack in the earth the length of California. These large scale natural catastrophes began last year with the Iran earthquake. They're going to continue and increase in size and devastation. To that will be added an endless war that is going to be joined by many other nations, begun by the invasion of Iraq. Add to that worldwide pestilences. And the next 6 years are going to see a drastic reduction in the world population, never before seen in all of history.
I always like to discover the why of occurrences, Blackroots. When I saw the clippings of many of the victims' surviving family members, I saw many Black faces, unless I saw wrong. If I'm not mistaken in my identification, what do you suppose the reason would be for destroying part of the 1,000,000,008 million? What are the implications for the remainder of us? Thanks again for the continued and darkening education. Peace. There was another diet related question I meant to ask you. I hope I didn't forget or overlook any previous information you may have shared on the topic, but I'll inquire again. What's your take on the eating according to your blood type theory that is currently on the natural health scene? Is there any validity to this idea, or is it just another European fad?
Although the 100,000 plus dead from the tsunami is tragic, it's nonetheless a minuscule number compared to the millions who die daily on Earth, many of whom are Black. I have not yet posted anything to clarify what I meant by the secondary requirement for the ending of this cycle, i.e., the incarnation of the 1,000,000,008 million. I'll explain briefly what it means and hopefully go into more detail later. First, it does not mean that once all the gods are incarnated on Earth, Black people are never again going to die. That's simply given the bodies that we live in the present. It will be so only after all Black people have had original long-lived bodies, when we will live continuously for 7,000 years. What it means is this: All the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods have agreed to join in Yaqub's project and take part in this world of sin and death. This was not the case at the beginning, 6,000 years ago. When Yaqub started his project of making the non-Black races, there were only 60,000 volunteers willing to carry it through, not counting the leaders. The leaders were neutral, knowing already that it was inevitable or preordained. So the rest of the population, amounting to over 1,007,795,000 people, opposed his project. They wanted nothing to do with it. Yaqub went to a secluded island to carry it through. But since at that time, all the gods, the entire Black population, have agreed to join in the project and take part in it. Some things that are not easy to understand and accept while we are living on Earth become easy after ascension, when both hindsight and foresight are crystal clear. So then it was predicted that as soon as all the gods have been incarnated in this 6,000-year period, that will bring the cycle to an end. That's the reason why the Black population has steadily increased over 6,000 years to reach the maximum of 1,008,000,000. To take part in Yaqub's project, the gods only have to live on Earth at one time or another, but not continuously. They, or we, live and die frequently because that's the normal rhythm of our short-lived bodies. We don't even have to live a full life on Earth to experience evil. A child who dies after 4 or 5 years has experienced enough of this world to know what evil is, because this world of white people is absolutely unlike our ancient world. It is opposite and contrary in every way imaginable. So we will continue to be born and to die until the end, when we regain our ancient bodies. And yes, the eat according to blood type thing is a scam, probably an opportunity to sell another diet or nutrition book. The only way to stay healthy is to eat less often. No one can be unhealthy from eating once a day.
I'm not sure that all of the 1,008,000,000 have decided to assist in the Yaqubian destruction of the Black race. My question to you, are those who continue to choose not to participate in self-destruction doomed along with the others? I apologize if I keep re-asking questions, but it's important to gather as much information as I can. Thanks.
You're incorrect to call Yaqub's work the destruction of Black people. Black people cannot be destroyed. God cannot destroy himself, let alone be destroyed by the puff of smoke called white people. So your question of whether you are doomed to perish with those who choose self-destruction is based on a wrong premise. There is no self-destruction, so there is no Black person doomed to it. Your question begs a much larger issue, i.e., the whole question of evil. The fact of your living presence here on Earth is proof that you consented to participate in Yaqub's world. If you hadn't, you would not have incarnated in the 6,000 years period. This holds true for all Black people. Don't ever be deceived by the teachings of the ignorant who say the appearance of Black people on Earth is a matter of chance, accident of birth, or other terms they coin. The incarnation of every Black person on Earth is intentional and is never a mistake. This whole question of why God does some things that seem contrary to logic has been debated for millennia. But all the speculations that so-called philosophers and religionists have put forth are based on ignorance, so they cannot reveal the true answer. The answer to this age-long question is simple, and I'll address it in the next few days when I start a discussion of Yaqub.
I'm sure that's going to be an interesting story because everything I've heard of the Yaqubian legend says, for some reason or another, he was out to destroy us. It'll be interesting to find out why we would want to arrive on this plane to participate in Yaqub's world, and why a smaller number of us would arrive here and then not want to be a part. I mean, how would you explain the existence of an individual such as yourself? You exist during Yaqub's age, but what you present of yourself doesn't reveal a Yaqubian essence or spirit. Okay, I sincerely appreciate you. I mean that. But I don't have a problem in admitting I'm a bit confused with a few things. Thanks for your patience, and I'll be waiting for that next installment. Peace.
I'm postponing the promised discussion until a later time in order to cover some other topics first. Everything in its time, as the saying goes.
Okay, I'll be waiting. Meanwhile, give me your take on the Mamiwata. What's the history with that particular Vodun image? Peace.
Part 1 of Vodun/Religions. The religion of Vodun, with all its symbols and gods and goddesses, as with all other African religions, are creations of the past 6,000 years. They did not exist before then. They all came about as a consequence of the teachings of Yakub. Notice how many of your questions relate directly or indirectly to Yakub, even when you apparently intend to ask an unrelated question. The reason is because this is really Yakub's world, and just about everything in it results directly or indirectly from some part of his teachings. I'll answer your question by relating briefly how modern African religions arose as a result of his work, but I'll leave the larger question of Yakub until later. Briefly speaking, Yakub, after he made the non-Black races, was compelled to teach them how to live. Civilization is always taught. It can never evolve naturally, as modern sociologists and the like would have us believe. It is not in the same realm of natural events as eating, sleeping, and procreating. In fact, without civilization, human beings naturally decline. Yakub was a great scientist, knowledgeable in the entire circle of wisdom. Knowledge is called a circle because it starts at the starting point and goes around until it ends at the same point, but higher and larger. If you will, imagine a coil or a snake coiled on itself with its head resting on its tail. The head and tail are at the same point on the circle, but the head is at a higher elevation. So it is too that the universe will end at the same point it began, which is divine unity, but at a higher level of wisdom due to the experience gained. That, in brief, is the true definition of wisdom, and in our language, it's called a serpent due to the metaphor I just mentioned. Yakub took the circle, or serpent of wisdom, and condensed it into 6 major parts of knowledge. He left out the 7th part, divine unity, because it cannot be taught, but only experienced. He further divided each of the 6 parts into 60 parts, each one corresponding to 1 year of an individual's life. In his original plan of making the non-Black races, their normal lifespan was to be 60 years, and in fact, this is the average worldwide. So the 60 parts of knowledge correspond to, or sum up, what each year of an individual life brings, or is supposed to bring in terms of experience. Life is supposed to be lived such that when a person reaches a certain age, he or she has gained and experienced the equivalent of that amount of knowledge corresponding to that section of the 60 parts. For example, when a boy or girl reaches puberty, he or she is supposed to have learned all that can be taught about sex and its 2 purposes. But this is no longer the case today. The same holds true for almost every avenue of civilized life, including such basic things as to how to cook properly, or clean house, or grow fruits and vegetables. How many youths can do these things today, or if not actually do them, know them theoretically? So the circle of knowledge was reduced by Yakub into 360 parts, or 6 by 60. The 360 parts, or degrees of knowledge, were not taught to the non-Black races, but only to Black people. All this applies to the past 6,000 year period. Before then, the division of knowledge was as follows.
Blackroots. I like the way you break everything down so that others may understand in depth. Please keep up the good work. Peace.
Peace. Part 2. Ancient knowledge was divided into 7 major parts. Then the 7 were each divided into 7,000 parts, each one corresponding to 1 year of the 7,000 years lifespan. That made a total of 49,000 subjects of learning. Therefore, there were a total of 49,000 rituals. The vast majority of them were called minor rituals and were performed differently in every town. Second are the major rituals, fewer in number and performed differently in every clan according to the chief's teachings. The third type are 7 in number and were performed exactly the same in every tribe. They are called the 7 great rituals, or festivals of the Black nation. Hence, the ancient circle had 49,000 divisions as opposed to the modern 360 degrees. Yaqub took 33 degrees of knowledge out of the 360 and established mystery or initiation temples to teach them to the leaders of the non-Black races. In addition, he took 3 more degrees and added them to the 33 for a total of 36 and taught these to highly qualified individuals who passed the standards of selection he set up. These 36 degrees of knowledge became the science of all the highest secret societies of the non-Black races. They had their foundation in the temple schools of ancient Egypt. Selected individuals of the non-Black races were recruited from around the world to the mystery schools and taught. They then went back and started secret societies, a few of which still exist to this day. In Egypt, the 36 truths of Yaqub became known as the 36 Neters. The word neter means truth and has been misinterpreted by Egyptologists to mean gods. The original 360 degrees of knowledge formulated by Yaqub were taught in even deeper secret among the high priests of that time, all of whom were Black. This knowledge was withheld from the Neter mystery schools. The high priests migrated down into Africa when it became obvious that the decline of Egypt was inevitable. They took with them the original 360 degrees of knowledge and settled among 10 African tribes located across the entire African continent. These became the foundation of the 10 African schools of ritual initiation, as well as 2 others located outside Africa, which are practiced the same way to this day. At the same time, the knowledge of the 36 Neters filtered down into the various African tribes when the priests began migrating out of Egypt into West, East, Central, and Southern Africa. It was from the science of these 36 Neters that all the tribal religious systems of Africa originated. So in Africa today, there are 2 types of schools of initiation: those of the original 360 degrees and those of the 36 degrees or Neters. Add that to the 33-degree mystery schools that exist all over the world, especially among the non-Black races, and that will give you an idea of the origin of the mystery or secret religions of the world. Now, each secret religion is different. Hence, there's Vodun, or the religion of the goddess Mamiwata, Mummy Water, or the mermaid goddess. It arose primarily out of the reverence for water as substance of all life. So too did every religion have its primary god or goddess, as well as many lesser deities in all their symbols. Now, here's the important thing. This present cycle is a cycle of decay. We can also use the word deterioration or corruption or any other word with a similar meaning. Everything decays in this age, especially knowledge. God has increased or waxed in wisdom since eternity and has never known what it is to decrease or wane in wisdom. One of the purposes of this cycle is to gain this experience. It befell Yaqub by preordination as the one to prepare the necessary conditions for evil, or decay, ignorance, self-forgetfulness, to manifest. He went about it basically by first deteriorating the human body to a 60-year lifespan and reducing the serpent of knowledge to 360 degrees, then further to 36 degrees, and finally to 33 degrees. The 360 degrees are practiced by 12 modern Black tribes today. The 49,000 degrees are held in abeyance in the custody of the 24 elders until the end of the age. The 33 degrees are practiced by Freemasons, especially the secret group called Rosicrucians on one side, and their opponents called Theosophists on the other side. The 3 plus 33, or 36 degrees, are practiced by so-called masters of the non-Black races, as well as others I will mention later. They are also practiced by the adherents of indigenous Africans and other religions such as Vodun. White people call this knowledge witchcraft or black magic in the hands of blacks, and white magic when practiced by them. The connotation is totally false, even though literally speaking, the black and white terms are racially appropriate. When one considers the intent of the magic, then black magic is the true form of magic, whereas white magic is false. Both systems may use basically the same scientific principles, but the purposes to which each one is put determines whether it is true or false magic. Both systems rely on the 3 highest degrees of knowledge out of the 36 to formulate their highest principles. Of these 3, I'll mention only one. Part 3. I'll mention the other 2 later, as they relate directly to the larger Yaqub story. This 1 degree of knowledge is called psychic science. It's a science of the imagination. You may remember I introduced a brief account of this science in the biology discussion. This is a natural science, as are all true sciences, that relies on the natural, God-given power of the mind to be creative. The mind is naturally and spontaneously creative, and one can see this in dreams, where whole worlds are created out of nothing. Although dreams are unreal, given that they are imaginary, the same applies to daydreams and fantasies, nonetheless, their effects on the human soul is absolutely real. A person may wake up from the most awful nightmare and be relieved that it was just a dream, but the fear he experienced was real. If he had come from somewhere where he had never experienced fear before, his dream experience of it will teach him to him as effectively as experience it in real life. It may not last long, but it is real at the moment he experiences it. This is one manifestation of the natural psychic power of all people. Now, the art or science of controlling this power comes in the phenomenon called lucid dreaming. This power, although powerful enough on an individual basis, can be increased dramatically by involving other people in it. This too is natural, following the laws of rhythms. Human minds, with their seat in the brain, oscillate within a particular spectrum of frequencies. It's possible to entrap this oscillation using the law of rhythms, according to which oscillations of the same frequency enhance one another and unite into a larger whole. When a person with a strong mind starts a certain type of imagination and finds other people who are sympathetic to it, the rhythm of his mind will entrap those willing participants such that all of them engage in the same rhythm and thus imagine the same reality. That is exactly how children were taught in ancient days. The word entrapment is totally inappropriate in the ancient context. The more proper word, perhaps, would be resonance, where a teacher gets the children's minds and hearts to resonate at the same rhythm as his. But entrapment is quite appropriate in the modern context because the intentions and use of this science have become perverted in many but not all cases. The truth of a science is determined by the intent of the user. So the same scientific principles can be used for both good and bad. By this entrapment, it's possible to make willing people to believe in a reality that does not exist, that is totally imaginary. As the knowledge of the 36 natures deteriorated, so too were the proper uses of psychic science forgotten. In the passage of many millennia, the uses went from one end to the extreme until a whole slew of ancestral religions were formulated. Many psychically gifted people down the ages came and contributed to them and started new ones or changed and modified the old ones. Hence, as time went by, there arose entire worlds of ancestral spirits that are totally imaginary. The spirits possessed those willing to participate, causing them to prophesy, divinate, cure illnesses, cast spells, and many other related activities that you are no doubt aware of. They gave rise to fetishes, symbols, gods, and goddesses, and new forms of rituals and sacrifices for enhancing the psychic power. What arose out of the corruption of psychic science is so convoluted and old in terms of centuries that to try and outline it all would take many pages. Suffice it to say that in every system that comes out of the original, there always remains a kernel of truth at its center. It is this kernel that is important for the reminding of Black people about our ancient history. Those people who are involved in ancestral religions like Vodun are already at a decided advantage and can comprehend the larger truths much more easily. However, there is always the danger of getting lost in the maze of the psychic worlds if one believes in them and takes them to be real. The truth is that they only affect those who are willing participants because their power, even the power of their symbols, actually emanate out of the minds of the participant and from nowhere else. Others with stronger minds get it started with suggestions, but the participant has to pick it up from there and take it all the way for it to be effective. Without willing participation, it has no power. That, in brief, is an explanation of the origin of secret religions.
I've read that Mami Wata was supposed to have been a foreign figure. This is supposedly why all the images are of a lighter raised woman. Is this the Yakubian influence? What is the significance of the science of cartography?
Yes, it is. The practice of using whites as a standard of beauty goes far back. The brainwashing in this regard is deep. For the same reason Black Christians today prefer to worship a white God. The idea of a Black God is repulsive to most of them, if not outright disgusting. But truth is eternally true. It cannot be changed by personal feelings. Eventually, all will come around to the true beauty of the Blackness of God. Are you interested in maps?
Blackroots, thanks again for the info. Yes, I'm interested in fully understanding so I can more effectively understand what's going on around me, why I'm here, and where in the world I'm supposed to be. I heard once that cartography was one angle to explore. Peace.
I'll look deeper into cartography to see if there's an angle I missed, and we'll see from there. Peace. Not much of interest in cartography except to those who want to carve up other people's lands and steal their gold. I'm almost sure you meant cartomancy or tarot cards. It's more interesting to talk about anyway.
Blackroots. No, I'm pretty sure it's cartography because the issue of dowsing comes up. Although you can proceed with the cartomancy discussion, that definitely should be interesting. Another thing I'd like to know is about the idea of superlearning and mega memory. You provided some information about educating young students. I'd like you to elaborate on what activities can be used to quickly increase memory and retention. Thank you.
Very good. We'll do it like that and talk about dowsing in cards, but after I catch up with some regular posts. I'm falling behind my schedule. Superlearning or memory retention depends directly on habituation, i.e., making it a habit to remember. The human mind is organized in such a way that it can be trained by repetition. Forgetfulness is nothing more than the habit of forgetting. Similarly, recall is no more than getting the mind into a habit of remembering, and this takes practice. Obviously, the best time to start training the mind is when one is a child, when the conscious mind is very pliable, but one can do it as an adult also. The key to success is to be aware that superlearning or recalling is like making a path through a field by constantly walking it. Once this idea becomes clear in the mind, then the training plan will succeed. There are many systems formulated by many authors to do this, some more successful than others. The differences in success is caused by whether or not the learner is aware of the mechanics of conscious recall, which, as I said, is to walk a path through the nerve circuits that make up the forest of the human brain. Most of the books, if not all, use the same technique of learning by repetition. There's a better method, though, that doesn't depend on books, using the details of your own dreams or daily activities. These two methods are the best and quickest because they are personal and therefore geared to each individual's uniqueness. What you do is keep a pencil and paper next to your bed and write down your dreams every morning and set as much detail as possible. Another alternative is to keep a daily journal and write down your daily activities every evening in as much detail as you can. The longer you do this, the more details you remember. Recollection is directly related to learning. The easier you can recall details, the easier you can learn new ones. Thus, superlearning and super recall are two sides of the same coin. In tribal societies where there is no writing, children are trained by adults by being asked to recount their dreams of the night before in detail and then relate their day's adventures when everyone is sitting around the home fire at night. This is done in an atmosphere of fun, making it enjoyable to the children. And so their memories become well trained, making it easy for them to remember and understand stories used to teach them.